In this video we're going to change our anti-roll bar from the original setup that you can see here, and we're going to change this to a little bit thicker top mounted anti-roll bar with some end links in between the wishbones. And the reason therefore is because the original one pulls down here and hangs quite low, so it's mainly to do with ground clearance. Firstly, you have the drop links, which are quite low. This is almost the lowest point of the car. And the second thing is that on the end of the anti-roll bar, it's bolted to the shock absorber with a little bolt, a little stud on the end of the bush on the bottom. And this is even lower. If you have really flat roads and you're a little bit low, that's not really a problem. But if you have some potholes, you will scrape the drop links and the studs on the shock absorbers. You can shorten the drop links so that this is a little bit higher. However, because we have a really enclosed floor on the S1, it's a little bit more difficult. Secondly, I'm going to order really nice, very expensive shock absorbers, and I do not want the little stud on the end fouling against the ground so that the stud will break or I might damage my shock absorber, so that's not worth it. So we're going to change this setup. The anti-roll bar that we're going to make is going to mount here, so it's going to go through the front luggage compartment above the steering rack, and it will go in between there. So we're going to take this off, and then we're going to do some measurements because we want our new anti-roll bar to be about the same as the one that we're going to take off. We can make it adjustable, so it can be a little bit stiffer if you want to, but we have to be a bit careful that we don't overload the suspension. So I'm going to take this off. So that's the original setup. We have to do some measurements. That is the width of the straight section, the distance from the straight section horizontally for the pickup point, and then the length of the arm on the side. I already measured this all, and I can input this into a little program on the internet which will calculate the spring rate of the anti-roll bar, and that's about 50 pound-inch. So that's what we've got to work with. Now, because of the way we're going to make our new one, it will be quite a bit shorter and the end links will be a little bit longer because we will have to curve around the shock absorbers, which are presented here with these wooden sticks because I don't have them yet. So we can put this to the side. I've already input the measurements, so now we can bolt up our little standoffs, which are these, and I bought these from Motorsport. So I'm going to drill some holes and mount them here. I can always make some more standoffs with some aluminium bar to mount them further forward if I want it, but we're going to start off by measuring and drilling out these holes so that we have a nice place to start from, and we can figure out the length of our anti-roll bar before we have to bend it up. To relocate the anti-roll bar from underneath to the top, we have these nice anti-roll bar mounts. They are a two-piece plastic design which we screwed on to the front T-section. There's a plate with two captive nuts on there on the inside of the chassis, and this has a 16mm hole, so our anti-roll bar will be a little bit bigger than standard. Standard is about 14mm, so now we're going to go to 16, so it's a little bit bigger, but we can calculate our load or spring rate of the anti-roll bar as we wish. Now, it's nice to have them here, but the problem is that they're a little bit too close to the chassis, to the pickup points. So to have enough clearance around the shock, we need to space these out a little bit. Now I'm going to make little standoffs that go between the plastic bit and the T-section, and I just have a piece of bar stock aluminium that we're going to use, and we're going to machine this a little bit to make some little standoffs. I already made it from the other side, so you can see that we just cut a piece off. This is 45 millimeters by 45 and it's 13 millimeters thick. So we're going to chop it off of our bar stock and then we're going to drill it for our mounting holes, and we're going to round off the edges to give it a nice shape so it doesn't look out of place. You can see that our main bolt holes have been drilled and it fits. These spacers, they make sure that everything is spaced out a little bit more towards the front because we have to make the bend in our anti-roll bar all around our shock absorber. This is a mock-up. I'm using shock absorbers. This is a mock-up of the shock. I'm using shock absorbers with a 2.25 inch internal diameter, which is bigger than it should be on a Series 1. Normally a Series 1 has a 1.9 internal diameter spring because the top wishbones are narrower, but I'm using upside down mounted shock, so I have enough clearance on the upper wishbone, but I do have a little bit more mass in here than I'd like. So we'll have to figure out how to get the anti-roll bar all the way around the shock without fouling anywhere. Now we have to make a routing for our anti-roll bar. So it starts here between the mounts, and then we have to go somewhere here, because on this level there's the lower mounting bolt for the shock, and that's what we're going to use as the pickup point from the anti-roll bar. So we need to go from here to here, and we have to make sure that there's enough clearance for the shock. So this is what I came up with, and hopefully this is going to work. This is a solid 16mm diameter bar of steel, and I've bent this in the shape that we needed by heating it with a butane torch and then clamping it in a vise and using a really large pole on the end to use as a lever, and then it was quite easy to bend. So you can see that I've done it in two sections, and I've made two bends here, and this will make sure that it's a little bit wider to go around the shock, so we have enough clearance. And on the end we'll use a slide clamp like this. I bought this from Motorsport. I only had to enlarge the hole a little bit because this was made for a 3/8 anti-roll bar, and this is 16mm, so it needed a little bit of clearancing, but now it fits. So we're going to mount this to the chassis on our clamps that I've shown you before, and then we can try to see if it all works. I can use the slide clamp on the end to lengthen or shorten these anti-roll bar ends. Then we can adjust the strength of the anti-roll bar. I'll have to do the calculations, but if I'm correct, on the end will be about the same as the original anti-roll bar, and we can go a lot stiffer if we go towards the front of this. So I was told that it would be very difficult to bend, but in the end it wasn't too bad. You just have to be really careful and that you have the angles correct. So there are two 45-degree bends on both sides. So now we'll try and bolt it up. We have to assemble the clamps a little bit to try to get them in the correct position. Okay, so the anti-roll bar is in. You can see that there's plenty of clearance all around the shock absorber, which will go here, and it has no chance of hitting. The only thing that we have to be careful of is if you turn the wheel all the way to the right, then we have enough clearance on this side. However, because this lever on the end of the anti-roll bar is quite long at the moment, if you turn all the way the other way, you can see that this end actually fouls on the caliper. And I knew this would be a problem, but we can shorten this a lot if we need to. Then we'll have our slide clamp, which we can put on the end here. There's a little grub screw on top, which will keep it in place. Now we have a drop link. Now you can see that this is a spherical drop link. It has a left hand and a right hand threaded spherical bearing, and it means I can change the length of this, and I'll have to make up something to attach this bolt to the lower shock bolt, like this. And on top we have the slide clamp, which we can adjust to the length that we want. This will loosen or tighten the anti-roll bar. The only thing that we have to figure out is the clearance on the back of the caliper. So I can probably chop it off here, and then we have all the clearance that we need. But I'll have to calculate the spring rate for the anti-roll bar before I can chop it off. Otherwise I might have to put this bend a little bit more towards the inside to get a little bit more clearance. So what I made for attaching the drop link to the lower shock bolt is this. So essentially I drilled and tapped the end of the lower shock bolt, and then I threaded in a 5/16 bolt, which we can use to attach the drop link. I didn't want to weld two bolts together because it would be a weak spot. So now this bolt has been threaded in about 20 millimeters all the way until here. So that's really strong. Now we can just use this to attach the lower shock. Now we have the drop link. So the drop link is a threaded rod at both ends. One's left hand, one's right hand threaded. Okay, so now the drop link is attached to the lower shock bolt, and this will complete the movement. But this is a really nice setup. I'm really happy to how it turned out. So you can see how the drop link connects the anti-roll bar to the lower shock bolt. So they have the same pivot points as they would have original. There's plenty of clearance for the shock. The only thing that we need to do is just to bend this a little bit more towards the inside, or shorten the anti-roll bar. But if we shorten it, this means that the stiffness goes up quite a bit. We've come to the end of this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'm quite happy with how the anti-roll bar turned out. How it will work once on the car is anyone's guess, but I'm quite optimistic. I've copied the design of other Europa owners, and I've also mimicked the way the anti-roll bars were set up on the early Lotus Formula Ford cars. So I'm quite optimistic that it will work fine, but only time will tell. So don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you won't miss any of the upcoming videos, and I hope I see you next time. Goodbye.